I know, I've heard that young people can multitask, but I can only do one thing at a time. Matt Allen's our next speaker. After graduating from Iowa State University with a degree in animal ecology, Matt worked for the Iowa DNR as a natural resource aide and AmeriCorps member for several months before taking a private lands position in the Logan NRCS field office. He then took a position with Pheasants Forever as one of the first Farm Bill biologists in Iowa. In 2013, Matt was hired by NRCS as a soil conservationist in southwest Iowa, and in 2018 took a district conservationist position in Madison County and then Adair County. In July of 2022, he became a resource conservationist at the Iowa NRCS State Office as the CRP manager. He continues to live in Winterset with his wife and 4 children. Please welcome Matt.
You have to make a joke about being right before lunch, right? You know, so So thank you for having me. I was here last year, talked about some similar things. Some of the slides will look a little similar, but there are some other ones in there that are obviously different. Last year I touched on some major changes within the continuous CRP realm with SAFE, State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement. We have 5 projects in Iowa that are available, and there were some different requirements and some changes to those. So those were some of the things I highlighted this year, or last year, excuse me. So we'll be talking a little bit about CRP updates, or CRP information, and then some more updates. So some CRP reauthorization, CRP program acres and numbers nationally compared to, as well as Iowa. A couple of the CRP signups that are currently going on at this point. One was already mentioned. A few slides on some practice standard updates. There's one new practice standard that was adopted here in Iowa, which is wildlife habitat planting 420. So I'll touch on that a little bit. And then a few updates to the seeding calculator. We'll talk about that, and then obviously any questions or discussion at the end. So, President signed the Further Continuing Appropriations and Extension Act in 2024 in November, which included a 1-year extension of the 2018 Farm Bill, thus reauthorizing CRP for 1 more year, basically through September 30th of 2024. So. That's what we're running on now. There hasn't been, like I said, a whole lot of change because, again, it's just continuing kind of the old way of doing things at this point. There's gonna have to be another either year extension or something, or a new Farm Bill, by that time. So we'll see what happens. I don't have a lot of updates as far as the Farm Bill itself. That's why I put question marks. So I do not have a lot of that insight or knowledge at this point. So we'll jump to some acres. The national cap continues to be 27 million. So that actually progressively got higher over, I think, the Farm Bill. I think it started at 23 million or something and went up to 27. And so fiscal year 24, we're still at 27 million. Current enrollment nationally is approximately 24.7 million acres, excuse me. And the next slide will go into a little bit more specifics about those numbers. But one of the administration's goals continues to be climate smart ag, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, carbon sequestration, and there's actually some studies going on. I have not seen any information out of those on the impacts to those particular topics when it comes to CRP. And so that'll be interesting to see some of that data. So I will preface this with, I went to there's a public FSA statistics site. Anybody can go there and grab a lot of these numbers. Last year when I pulled the numbers, the day before I did this, they updated it of course. And so I kept looking and looking and looking, and the earliest was December of '23. So it should be updated sometime in here for January, or maybe even, or for January. But so these numbers will vary, probably depending on what actual report you pulled, when it was pulled, because there are numbers that are in flux of being canceled or terminated, and so there's always some changing and ebbing and flowing. But this will give kind of a good general overview. So obviously the black is national, the red is in Iowa, so you can see that. Iowa has, we're heavy on continuous, and actually, I think 28% or so of that is actually safe. So state acres for wildlife enhancement practices make up that 1.2 million. So again, nationally, we're close to 24.7 million. Iowa's 1.6 million, and the number of contracts, I like to point this out. Just obviously, we're I think top 6. Iowa. I say we. I assume everybody's from Iowa, but that's not true. Iowa's, I think, top 6 for total CRP acres in the country, but we're by far number 1 in number of contracts. We're 19% of the contracts nationwide, with 103 to 104,000 just in Iowa, and so. We as an NRCS and PF and other partners, since 2019 have actually been touching those contracts more than we ever have. And so, with status reviews and things like that. And so there's a tremendous workload when it comes to that. The second closest state is Illinois with like 74 to 75,000. So, and then I think it actually quickly drops off to about 35 to 40,000. So pretty significant change. Average per contract's it ranges anywhere from 16 to probably 16 and a half, depending on the numbers that you pull. And then below, just kind of, those are national numbers, kind of looking at the acres and how that's split between continuous, general, and grasslands programs, and then the contracts, it kind of does the same. So here's a graph for CRP that's expiring. And so last year I didn't have the contract numbers at the bottom, but as you can see, coming up, it's going to be a tremendous workload for re-enrolls and things like that.
Matt, just wait for a minute.
I was just going to say that. I was like, I better stop. You don't want to hear this anyway, do you? We good? All right. So this year, for actual expiring acres is not as high as it's obviously going to be. For the number of status reviews that our staff are out on and partners, it's a tremendous workload. So the status reviews are year 4, so contracts in year 4, and then second to last year contracts we do status reviews. So this doesn't totally tell the whole story as far as workload in that particular year, but you can certainly see that 25, 26, 27 really jumps up there with that. So I'll jump into some CRP signups. So we're currently in continuous signup 61. So that was announced January 12th. And so FSA could actually begin to take offers starting then. New offers or new land with continuing acres, and then land scheduled to expire in September 30th of 24. So that is a change. They could start processing those, again, starting January 12th. So that is a change from previous policy. So producers will be able to offer their land for re-enrollment at the start of the sign-up rather than in April. So as we'll touch on, there is a batching period. So there's kind of a caveat this year, but it's going to be nice moving forward that when it comes to producers and workload, we'll actually be able to start that sooner than we have in the past. And so if somebody had a re-enrollment, we technically couldn't really do the contract or anything until April 1st, which is 6 months before the start date. But now, with this new change, they're going to allow basically that process to start January 1 for re-enrollment. So I think that will be beneficial. I think that'll, let the administration and things know as well, how much interest there is and that type of thing in re-enrollment acres. So with that being said, this year there's batching for the continuous offers. And so, the administration or nationally, they're worried about, not going over that cap. And so they put this batching requirement in this year. And so the initial batching period is January 12th, so the start of the sign up to March 15th. So that'll end here in, another, a week or two. And so the folks that want to re-enroll or want new offers or things have to make sure there's some checks, the check boxes are checked. FSA then is able to put them in a submitted status in their own system. And then that at the cutoff then goes kind of up to the national office. They will say, yep, those are acceptable. And then they'll notify the states. And then at that point, we can proceed with actual plans and getting them actually back to FSA and for approval. So the target for letting us know is April 1st. So ultimately, while they can get the offers and things submitted through FSA, NRCS can't actually start on those plans until April 1st, so that's really not much of a change. But I'm assuming, and I don't know this may eventually go, this may go away. But right now, that's what we're going with. And then I say initial batching period, I'm guessing there's going to be others, depending upon the offer numbers and things like that, further down the road. So enrollment type, so continuous CRP. So within that, Clear 30, farmable wetlands, HELI, SAFE, so all of those contracts, will be able to be in this batching period. So it's coming up pretty quick. General sign-up 62 was just announced, as it was said previously, on Saturday the 2nd. And the sign-up period is March 4th, so that was Monday through March 29th. So it's actually a fairly short window. There's not a lot of change as far as processing or ranking and prioritizing. It will continue to use the Environmental Benefits Index, the EBI. So there's little change with that. Ultimately, the more diversity participants choose to either maintain or establish, the higher EBI score they get. I mean, that's one major component that they have probably the most control over, as well as, doing some enhancement for wildlife through adding pollinator habitat to the offer or food plots and things like that. So that is currently going on at this point, and FSA can be taking those offers anytime. I did get some people saying, I haven't even sent an email to our staff. I'm assuming they sent it because I was reading through the notice and things. But I learned of it Monday as well. So I was not at Pheasant Fest, so I should have been. I would have got a jump on that. We'll go into some conservation practices. So wildlife habitat planting 420, other states had previously adopted that practice. It's a new practice standard to Iowa. We've just adopted it. So really it's to establish wildlife habitat by planting herbaceous vegetation or shrubs, looking to improve degraded wildlife habitat for targeted wildlife species, trying to resemble some historic desired or reference native plant communities. So again, the primary resource concern is wildlife with this particular practice. That's a slightly different in some ways to Conservation Cover 327, because 327 has the wildlife component, but it also has a soil erosion component as a resource concern to treat as well. So this is specific to wildlife. Before I forget, so on the right, there's quite a few documents available, and that was put together by Sarah Nizzi of the Xerces Society, as well as our state biologist, James Cronin, to try to help with planners, planning staff, as well as obviously landowners. So this is a snip right out of the field office technical guide, which is a public-facing website, so people can go there to find out more of this information. But just some highlights. Again, native species only, so no introduced grasses or forbs. No trees, it's just they can do some shrubs, but no trees. This is not a tree planting practice for wildlife. Currently, we'll continue to use the native seed calculator. So currently on there is a 327 conservation cover check sheet. That's basically going to be used for 420 plantings to make sure they meet certain criteria and the purpose of that planting. I'll touch on that a little bit. We will be making some of the change or adding a 420 check sheet. So initially, this can be used in a lot of different ways. One of the little bit different ways that we foresee it to be used is actually in urban agriculture. So, doing some, beetle bank type planting or things like that, and then plug plantings. And so this is geared more towards, or will have opportunities to be used more towards those kind of specialty situations. It has payment scenarios, like small scale payment scenarios, so that are more geared towards, the urban ag or the smaller scale folks at this point. Not to say it can't be used on a larger scale too. So it went into effect October 1 of 23. So this is, we're half a year into using this in Iowa. And so I'm sure there'll be tweaks and changes, and how this is really going to mesh with 327 is yet to be seen. Obviously, it should partner well and be available for more opportunity, I guess. So currently, 420 will not be used when planning CRP, so we try to make that clear to staff. We will continue to use 327 conservation cover when applicable. There are some situations where 327 isn't used either, but that may change. The 327 and 420, we may be using those, while planning CRP in the future, but we will kind of see how that goes. It's going to depend a little bit on the Conservation Cover 327 standard update. We have still yet to get that from National. That's been probably 2 years that we thought we were probably going to get something. And so National does a review and goes through their process, and then essentially it comes to the state for adoption and updates, and then we have a year once it comes to the state to do that. It has not done that yet, and so we're hoping soon, because there's already some things that we are looking at potentially changing or looking at least at this point. So when we do that, we look at updating guidance documents, which is kind of what it is and how to do that, or how to accomplish certain goals. Implementation requirements is what do you have to do to accomplish that. So what's being seeded, how much, where, that type of thing. Statement of work, and then some other documents is needed. So all those will be updated. So again, we're in a holding pattern at this point. I think once that comes out, that'll sort, we work through the process, I should say. Hopefully that kind of helps us really see how 420 and 327 either may be separated or work jointly, or how that's going to look in the future. So within 327 currently is the native seating calculator. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with it or have looked at it at least. Because of the new adoption of 420 and eventually 643, which is rare and declining habitat, there's going to be a name change to the native seating calculator. Currently, it's the long name 327 Iowa OTH, which means other. Conservation Cover Native Seating Calculator 2022. Very governmental name. And the new one's just going to be Native Seating Calculator. So that's going to be, that's pretty much what it's referred to as anyway. So, but the reason for that, again, is it's not just 327. It's going to be 420, 327. Again, 643 is actually already in there. And so with that, currently it's housed within the Conservation Cover Practice Standard within FOTG. So the FOTG Field Office Technical Guide, Section 4, Practice Standards and Supporting Documents. So it's currently in there, and then under the Conservation Practice Standards and Support Documents, Conservation Cover. And so that's kind of where it's nested right now. With the name change, it's actually just going to be under the Ecological Sciences Tools, which is actually somewhat new at this point. And so, again, that'll make it a little bit more applicable to some of those other practices. And it's not a great screenshot by any means, but the green arrow is where it's going to be housed. So a couple other, or a few other updates to the seating calculator. So, again, we're currently, the red circle basically shows a 327 check sheet, which is what gets used the vast majority of the time when checking seed plans or developing them to make sure it meets certain criteria. There will be a wildlife habitat planting 420 check sheet tab added, so that when we're doing 420 practices, or practice I should say, then that's what we're going to be used. But if you remember, currently, right now, until these updates are made final, we will just continue to use the 327 check sheet to make sure seedings and things are meeting standards. Another update proposed, or that will be coming, or that we're planning on, I should say, is we're going to add a dry music and wet music. Oops, I missed a dash there. Options under the soil moisture regime to hopefully be able to open some things up, but also maybe drill some stuff down, as far as specific sites and things like that. But there was some requests for that, and Sarah Nizzi's been, she went through all the species on the calculator and kind of looked at, I think, 3, 4, or 5 different documents and locations and things for that information, and then assigned them kind of where they fall within there. So we still will be seeing that hopefully at the next update. I should say currently it just lists dry music or wet. So again, we'll be adding kind of the intermediate, the dry music and the wet music. So within the native seeding calculator, if there's a seeding supplement to the seeding plan tab, and so if you fill out the name and some of those things, they transfer over to the actual seeding plan itself. That's going to be renamed by simply removing the 327 reference out of it. So it's going to basically, the new naming convention will be Iowa NRCS supplement to the seeding plan. And so for those that don't know, basically the seed plan obviously lists the species and the rates and that type of thing. The supplement is essentially kind of sideboards or frameworks. So if we're doing a CP25 CRP, for example, it'll list what the practice is. It'll list, 40 seeds per square foot is the standard. It'll list the minimum of five species of native grass, 10 native forbs and legumes as the minimum, whether it's a full seeding rate, half seeding rate, whether it's dry, mesic, wet. So there's some sideboards. So if, that can be handed to the seed dealer or whoever's selling seed, and as long as they're within those parameters for that particular practice or program, then they're able to, or it gives them those sideboards to kind of follow. So, again, that'll kind of make that more applicable to just more than, 327 and CRP. So that's kind of the goal. We will continue to probably make some tweaks on that to better suit maybe some other practices, or 420, I should say, in other instances when it's going to be used. So really the only change to probably a species at this point would be foxglove beard tongue, and so Penstemon digitalis. So we'll be adding spring to the bloom period. Currently it's just summer, and so we've had discussions on that. So hopefully that will obviously open up another species, for that bloom period during times people are planting or planning pollinator habitat or needing to meet that requirement of a spring species. So again, we're going to continue to evaluate, taking suggestions or concerns. We have kind of a working sheet. If somebody emails us or lets us know, we're not always updating this, but we have a place to kind of dump that so that when we do update it, we kind of have a reference sheet to see what's been suggested or concerns, and then we can go through all of those. So, note at the bottom, so we do anticipate the release date of August 24. And once it's officially released out, then this stuff will become, what we're using. So, that's may or may not change, but I know we're trying to, there's been some talk with the seed industry that, from my understanding, we want to try to help or work together when those seed mixes are kind of being designed or thought about, trying to get them out a little bit earlier, or this type of stuff out earlier to try to help with that, to know kind of what changes are coming for that. So with that, are there questions? Looking for any discussion. I have Al, if there are questions I don't know or there are, we need to follow up on, he's writing them down, and then I can send it back through Laura and get it out to the crowd if there's are some. So, anyway, so questions, discussion, what's working, what would be beneficial, CRP questions or anything, so.
CRP renewals every year, what percent would you say get renewed versus they don't qualify because something went wrong versus, they're going to go back into crops? Do you have that kind of rough figure of all these contracts that are coming due?
Kurt would probably have a better idea, but I mean, most of our workload is re-enroll continuous. I would say generally if they don't fit their current practice for whatever reason, there typically is an alternative if those folks really do want to stay in CRP. So as far as percent-wise, I don't know, I would say 90% probably go back in, 95%, I don't know, so as far as aren't, if they just want it out, it doesn't probably matter.
And some of that is they were all like, some of the old ones were cool season grasses, and now they're being, upgraded.
Yep.
And that's a little bit more, trouble or more work.
Yep.
But that's great that they're being renewed.
Yeah, excuse me, yeah, so, and there's different opportunities. I mean, if folks, have a continuous that is, predominantly cool season and, we typically will have something that may fit or they will be eligible for, but yeah, if they don't wanna kinda do that conversion or something, I mean, general is an option, actually, cause they could offer it as a CP1, but we like to, you all don't wanna hear that, but, we do, I would say overall encourage diversity and things like that. So a lot of times there is some, program that actually, we try to fit them in, and a lot of times that does work. Did I answer your question? Sorry. Tim?
Yeah, I had a question about CRP eligibility. So my understanding is the adjusted gross income has to be less than like $899,000 in order to participate in CRP, which seems like a lot of money, and I understand not giving taxpayer money to wealthy people, but in a voluntary system, strategy that we have here, people that are over that limit have no incentive to participate in the nutrient reduction strategy. Am I missing something?
I would have to follow up on some of that 899,000.
It's on all the forms.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a, yeah,
It's has a limitation. It's for all of our programs, it's not just CRB. And it's a 3-year average that moves. So, we will sometimes see producers who sold a farm, and so they'll have to they won't be eligible for new enrollment, for a year or something along those lines because of that, if they didn't take advantage of other tax advantages they can do to lessen that income. But, yeah, we do sometimes run into that, but yeah, it's a statutory thing with the farm bill, with payment limitations. Similarly, so is the 50,000, per year per warm body, I'll say. That's also a statutory thing, which will definitely be probably debated, heavily in this farm bill cycle.
I was just wondering for new contracts, what is the current time frame requirement to get their practice planted? Is it, like Aaron brought up, about site prep being so critical, which is, you just want to plant it, kind of defeat the purpose.
sure.
If it needs prep.
So technically, it's 12 months from the approval of that contract, but there are stipulations that it can get an extension, and I would encourage that if they have to spray cool season out and that hasn't happened, let's maybe shift that back and do that right. So that there are some parameters that they are able to extend that. Kind of drop dead is 36 months, but after that first extension, it's got to go to county committee for approval to be able to get that, and then after that, it'll basically be terminated. So, is that, okay, yep.
Isn't the monarch recovery directives or something in the pipeline, or are we kind of focusing on CP 42 as that avenue?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you have any monarch recovery directives or things in the pipeline for new programs, or are you kind of focusing on CP 42 as the way to?
So we've actually met with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they, we're essentially going to target, I think their goal is like 100 acres to figure out, look at CRP, and if it's not suitable habitat, is to go in and augment that using their own manpower and equipment and things to improve that for pollinators and monarch in particular. Otherwise, I'm not hearing specifics for monarch CRP wise, so there are some things going on like I said, kind of on a smaller scale, but generally, from my understanding, it's more of a focus on, you know, the pollinator practice, and trying to encourage, you know, PF includes milkweed and all those. So unless there's an update that I'm not sure of, you know, there are some small local stuff, local, you know, Iowa. But I'm not hearing anything specific, or changes or anything in relation to the monarch at this point.
Thank you, Matt. We will have, we're going to have breakout discussions in the afternoon, so there'll be opportunities
Yes.
to continue discussions then. Thank you again.